Good afternoon and welcome. Evening, actually. Good evening. My name is Soela Langeni from Book Circle Capital. Thank you so much for choosing to be here on a Thursday evening to launch lessons from past heroes with Phumlani Majozi and Gershwell Brooks. We are an independent bookshop that focuses on African literature. We've been around since 2017, September 2017, and we focus purely on stories like this. We believe there's no expiry date on our stories and books. So we gather like this on a regular basis. We also do readings for kids. This Saturday we'll have Shudufa Zomosida here signing books. Refilo Muahludi also launching her book. But today it's Phumlani's night. Mine is just to welcome you and honor Tracy. Tracy, where are you? Tracy from TMP Publishing, who's Phumlani's publisher. I honor Janine, who's doing the publicity. And just to say, the bathrooms are at the back, right there. The center has Wi-Fi, 27 boxes. Please tag us. Please tag Phumlani. He's got lots of followers. Please tag him. And on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Book Circle Capital. Please feel free to also patronize places in the center. We've got a gallery right by the side and coffee and drinks, but we also have our own drinks at the back. Without wasting any time, I'm going to hand over to Gershwell, who do our discussion, and then after that we'll open up for questions, and then Phumlani will sign books and take pictures with you. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I think first and foremost, Soela definitely deserves a round of applause for not only a great intro, but the fact that the Book Circle Capital managed to survive COVID, and we all know what that did to many, many businesses. Starting in 2017, 6 years later being here is really wonderful. Anyway, good evening. My name is Gershwell Brooks, as you have heard. Some of you might have heard me late night and occasionally on 702, because I do freelance for 702, and every time someone is ill or doesn't feel like coming to work, they give me a call and ask me to stand in for that person. But my day job is head of Mandela Day at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and I really thank Phumlani for giving me this opportunity to be at the book launch and for us to discuss his book. So yes, this is not ones where I hope I can wing it through the discussion. I actually read the book and I enjoyed it, and I have a couple of questions for Phumlani, and I think first and foremost I hope that I'm not asking a redundant question, because sometimes that does happen, but Phumlani, before we even get into the meat and the mashed potatoes, who is Phumlani M Majozi, except for a guy that I've noticed on my Twitter timeline getting into many, many Twitter wars.
And your show.
In fact,
you didn't tell them that story, eh?
No, in fact, no, I didn't, and my apologies for that. If I'm not mistaken, you made your radio debut on 702 with me.
Yeah, exactly. So you and I have come a long way, eh?
No, we've known each other for years, and I always enjoyed conversations with him, and I think the one thing that is definitely not going to happen, it's not going to be a sweetheart conversation tonight. I'm going to ask some tough questions, but there won't be any need for anyone throwing any chairs. But who is Phumlani M Majozi? Let's start there.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Great to see you, to meet you, and thanks everyone for coming through. I see many great faces. Yeah, I see Ngwato. Great to see you all. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see you. I really appreciate it. My family is here, my father is here, and my little sister as well is here, my brother and my aunt. So it's great to be here with the family. So yeah, I'm from KZN, man. I'm from KwaZulu Natal. In Stenga, Kwatuguza. It's called Kwatuguza now. It used to be called Stenga, but you know it's changed to Kwatuguza. You know we are in this habit of changing names in the country. So that process has already taken place in Stenga. So that's where I'm from, which is the north coast of KwaZulu Natal. So I came here. It's been years since I've been here in Johannesburg, and when I got here, I was from University of Cape Town, where I had studied my honors degree. I had also studied at Rhodes as well, at Rhodes University, where I did my undergrad there. So when I came to Joburg, I was already a driven person, right? I loved the ideas of public policy, of engagements, debates, the socio-economic issues of South Africa. I was always passionate about that. And when I came here, I was thinking, okay, so I have been posting a lot when I was at UCT on social media, but are there any organizations I couldn't get involved with? So I have been involved with the few organizations. I have been, at one point I ran them. I mean, when I came, I used to come to your show. I was running I was the youth coordinator at the time for the Free Market Foundation. I'm also involved now with the Chartered Institute of Business Accountants. So I've been involved with various NGOs. Outside as well is one NGO that I'm involved with. So because I believe that civil society has a huge role to play in the country to make a difference. We can bring change. We can be active citizens who hold leaders to account, who challenge policy, who try to make a difference through civil society. And I've been heavily involved in that over the years. And then I got into commentary, which is what, when you say, I get people talking on Twitter and so on social media. The goal is to stimulate conversation, right? Because I love that. I mean, I used to see this. In fact, I was thinking about it the other day. Because when Tracy approached me to write the book, she had tracked my online profile and she saw my website that I was planning, I was writing something. So Tracy said, she contacted me, and then we had coffee. And she was like to me, Phumlani, your courage, your bravery, to stick it out, to tell your opinion. I see that you are planning to write something, and then can I help you, to publish this thing at some point? And she says to me, you know what? I would love those views that get people talking to come out in your book, right? Don't be shy to express your opinion on how you see things. And I appreciate that Tracy gave me that opportunity. So I've always been a person who's driven by ideas, engagement, conversations. And when I was at Rhodes, I remember there was both used to sit there. I remember Sfiso was part of that. There's a friend of mine there who came through when we were at Rhodes. So wherever there was a table where there was me, by the time we finished supper, there would be noise, or rated engagements, So there was always a thing I had, even when I was young in my undergrad years. So hence then, that has led to the production of this book. So this project that I took on, in fact, I had the idea as way back as 2017. To approach this book, and it was a sort of an accumulation of thought and engagement and the fascination, being fascinated by the socio-economic affairs of the country. I do writing. As well, I do appear on the media. I've been on international big TV stations, and my goal is to try and push for the conversation to take place. I strongly believe in a democracy that is engaged, that is robust, and I feel that South Africa lacks that. And I think, as a role, we as people, we need to make our democracy, robust. I don't expect people to agree with me all the time. I'm not a fan of that. In fact, I speak at conferences, and the conferences I enjoy are the ones where you have people really challenging what Phumlani is saying. I was at Wits University recently speaking to MBA students. Because economist Lumgile Monde invited me to speak to his students, the MBA students. I engaged more the fact that students were like, what is this guy? Why is he saying these things? Triggering issues that people want to stay engaged on. And that's the goal. And I enjoyed it because really you could see that these people, very few of them could really say, we agree with you, In fact, I would trigger that conversation that they never thought that I would. So I enjoy that a lot, yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of our radio conversations,
Yes.
where we might not necessarily agree on every last detail, but the one thing is definitely your conversation, what you bring up is definitely thought-provoking, and that's what I can say about this book. Because reading the book, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, yes, a lot of it doesn't necessarily align with what I automatically assumed to be a universal truth, but at the very same time it makes me think very differently, and I think I shared that with you, and we'll get into those nuts and bolts. But what I want to get to first is the fact that, and I think you've hinted at it, at the fact that, of course, this goes very much against the grain in terms of what is the South African narrative at this particular point in time. I think let's start with the fact that lessons from past heroes, you are delving into a lot of black history. Black South African history. Black South African history that all too often is used to justify why there needs to be greater state intervention, why there needs to be greater assistance for black people, because these are the founding fathers, they've built this beautiful foundation, etc., etc., and today the oppressed people need a hand to uplift them. What you are saying is, no, let's look at them, see what they've been through under very difficult circumstances, that all of them, in essence, lifted themselves, and that's what we need today. But that goes very much against the grain of what you hear as the popular narrative.
And what I observe, yes, you are right. So I haven't told what motivated me to, specifically what motivated me to write this book, which will answer your question briefly. So I was at a Kenya conference in Nairobi, so I was flying over Africa, coming to South Africa. And then as I'm sitting in my flight, I see the in-flight magazine, I think it was Sawubona magazine with the SAA. And then at that year, which was 2017, the ANC, or the ANC government, was basically celebrating the 100 years of Oliver Tambo. Right, that was the narrative of the year, that Oliver Tambo is turning 100 years old, let's remember him. So, and then there was a section about the life of Oliver Tambo. When I read about this person, I was so much touched by who he was personally. Forget about the anti-apartheid sort of, a fighter, the political man, who went to exile for about 3 decades. Forget about that. Look at his personal life. His push on education, right? His dreams of becoming a sort of a medical, professional. Going at University of Fort Hare, pursuing mathematics and science. Graduating when he finished high school, graduating at, as one of the top students. I was touched by the story of this person. That this is not a person. We always see these people as these anti-apartheid sort of fighters, but we don't understand them individually. What is it they were doing personally to improve their lives?
Right? And admittedly in the book that you say that you weren't one of those people that actively pursued the readings and
Yes.
the history of Oliver Tambo, and that one moment
Was what really sort of say, you know what, I have to think of something where I profile these people. Now the personalities I discussed there, it's a few people, but I've taken a few people who really represent an idea. To say, look, there were many of these people who were doing, in the face of oppression, they were trying, to better their lives, and in many ways they did better their lives. Now I must stress this. The reason what also, boss, you asked, there is an observation I have made. And the observation I have made is that, yes, we have achieved many things over the past 30 years of our democracy, but we have also cultivated a culture where we think that someone somewhere needs to come and help you, right? We have created this culture of government being the nanny of states being the nanny, of being nanny to people, instead of creating a culture where we are entrepreneurs, where we pursue our dreams, where we push to be better people. And that culture hasn't, by the way, only recognized by me. Even the former minister, Lindiwe Sisulu, has. Even at some point, Nelson Mandela as well made comments around that we need to be people who are really creators and builders, instead of waiting for some sort of state intervention to come state intervention to come and be the decider of our lives. So this book is about motivating people to become better, to push through. And I'm saying to people, look, there were people who came way before us, who faced very difficult, who lived in a more racist society, where they were neglected by the government, right? In the sense that their rights were not being they were not being recognized. And in fact, the state went as much as it could to ensure that it represses the people. And I'm saying that we're now 30 years into our democracy. We can vote, we can hold our leaders to account. If we see something not going right in our, in the governance of our country, we have to hold our leaders accountable. So that is the narrative of the book, because I think that we are slacking, somewhere. And by the way, Gashua, there is a guy, a very fascinating figure called Professor Maurice Radebe. Maurice Radebe is the head of Wits Business School, and please check up on him. Maurice Radebe is a very fascinating people, because he came out of, he became a chief executive of Sasol. He made a lot of money in corporate. And in one of his recent interviews, Professor Radebe says, you know what, he has observed something, that the spirit of entrepreneurship, ever since over the past 30 years, in his view, it's been kind of going down, right? That we are creating a culture where we are not really drivers of our destiny, right? It's Professor, the head of business school right now, he's the current head of West Business School. He said that, Professor Radebe, a few months back, that people think that the state is going to come and be the helper. We are not really the drivers and the creators, and that culture has to change. So there are few people who would, align to the narrative that I'm putting forward in the book.
You make it very clear in the book that you prefer less intervention from the state. In fact, you use the term now that we're living in somewhat of a nanny state system, where the state wants to be responsible for everything. And a lot of people on the other side would turn to you and say to you, yeah, Phumlani, but part of the reason is because some form of redress needs to be done. And the state ultimately are the people taking all of our tax money, and that tax money then needs to be reinvested in people to improve their lives. Whether that has actually happened or not is a debate. I'm not going to start that debate now. The question that I have for you then is, what is the role of the state with the South African history and context in mind, juxtaposed to the examples that you use throughout your book?
So that's a very good question, and a very sophisticated one, because it's very important I'm not misunderstood. So your question was, what is the role of the state given where we come from, given the inequalities, that you still have the rich and the poor, that you still have poverty. Last time I checked, about 50% of the population is classified as poor, whatever that classification is according to statisticians, but that's what they are saying. What is the role of the state? In the context of South Africa, the role of the state is to empower people to be able to pursue their dreams, right? What do I mean by that? Let's be specific. When you look at the current statistics or the assessments that have been done, you find that, let's do it racially now. Let's do it racially. When you look at the racial, because we also have racial inequality in the country, you're going to see that when it comes to the educational outcomes, right, when it comes to reading, mathematical, sort of outcomes, science and all that, black kids, they tend to do worse, right, than other racial groups. Those are just inequalities that we see. We also find that even according to unemployment rates, black people account for, they have high unemployment rates in the country compared to other racial groups. Now, the goal of the state should be to do what? You want to make sure that people in townships, in rural areas, I'm talking about black people now, they get decent education. And the education that can make them to compete, to be able to better their lives. Right. Because it's clear that as you look at the levels of education, you can see that those who are really at the disadvantaged, they also don't have good, educational background to be able to better their lives. And then there's also the matter of entrepreneurship. Right. Because again, if the state is basically looking at how do we create a culture of entrepreneurship, right? And by the way, and ensuring that where it can fund businesses or smaller businesses that have potential, that are worth investing in, it can invest in those businesses. So what we are doing there is that we are creating people who are educated, people who can read, we have good education. We are also creating a place where we invest in entrepreneurs, because that has to be the driver of the economy. Now, those two things I've spoken to you about, that's not the government giving things. It's government empowering people to be able to sustain their lives, right? Because if you do have a business, and by the way, the investment doesn't have to be from government or government doing the funding for entrepreneurs. I believe more in the private sector, pushing that, those investments. But the government can come through where we have entrepreneurs who have potential, who can produce something, and they're doing something good for the community and for business. You can invest in those. What you're doing with those two things alone, you are empowering people so that they say you should teach a man, what do they call it? Teach a man to what's the fish thing?
It's become a meme, so let's not mess it up.
Yeah. So let people empower people
teach a man to fish rather than
let people empower people to be the shapers of their destiny, because you are empowering them. You are not being being a nanny of a state. You are empowered. But that was a question about what is the role of the state, given the context where you come from.
No, indeed, and I think a round of applause for you that agree that would be the state then doing their job. But Phumlani, I mean, the one thing that I found fascinating about this book is that it's a beautiful summarized version of going through history, isn't it? Because you go through South African history at the very minimum. I mean, you start us off sort of at the end of colonialism into the Union of South Africa. That was 1910, for those of you that skipped out on that history class. Then we go into the beginnings of apartheid in 1948 and independence in the early 1960s. Take us all the way through to the tumultuous 1980s, all the way into CODESA, and then the formation of the early democracy, and so on. And then from there till this point, where we're 29 years into democracy, almost 30 years into democracy, literally 5 months away. My question is this, though. What are some of the common threads that you pick up in that historical journey? Because what I found interesting is that, for me at least, no matter how far back you go in time and how far forward you go in time, the examples that you draw from, and I'm specifically speaking about the past heroes, not the villains in the book. What are some of the interesting threads that we can draw from them in terms of what are the lessons that young people should be taking from those particular individuals?
Sure, that's a very good question. So the first one is, I would say, perseverance, right? In the face of difficulties, that as a young person, you have to persevere and push to better your life. I think that's very important. The second one is the ideas of what I call, there's a section there about the work ethic, which I think is very important. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we always casually talk about what the government should do in terms of public policy. And I've made this statement even in media interviews as well. And that's fine. Of course, we need to have the right policies that empower people, that empower the poor, and so on. But, you can have as best policies as possible. If you don't have that cultural sort of stronger work ethic, you're going to have a problem. Because fundamentally, you are going to have programs, but if people are not driven to take on the risk and the opportunity and to work hard and to invest those 3 hours. In fact, I cite Professor Neil Ferguson here, his book Civilization, right? Because I sort of speak about lessons from the West. What is it that made the Western nations to go from what they were once like Africa, in terms of the poverty, the challenges, and so on, and then today they are amongst the rich? What are some of the things we can pick up there? And what he lists in that book, which I cite him, what he, amongst the things he points to, was the strong work ethic, right? Being driven to achieve. That there was a thing that was cultivated within the Western culture as well. So for young people, what they must pick up here is that when you look at these personalities I speak about, they were hard workers, these guys. They were driven. They could take the risk. They could travel the world whenever an opportunity. These guys traveled the world. The guys I speak of here in the early 1900s, they were traveling the world. You know, some of them lecturing in America, teaching in America. People like Sol Plaatje, you know, going to Britain, doing his work there, going to America, you know, doing writing books there as well. So that spirit of hard work, the strong work ethic, and I think young people need to pick up from that. And also the idea that, because I think, and I do mention this in the book, that yes, these guys were very much, they wanted recognition in South Africa. They wanted to be part of to shape the direction of the country. But there was little that really was expected in the sense that government should be the nanny. That was not the culture at the time. In fact, globally, that was not even, you know, and I cite some academic papers there that even in Western countries, when you look at it, even look at the numbers in terms of, you know, government spending as a percentage of GDP and so on, it was a plus minus 10%, right, which was in the single digit. Compare that to today, it's plus minus 50% now, where we've seen this statist intervention and programs. So that's one thing they can pick up from it, that these guys, they wanted to do things for themselves. All they wanted was recognition so they can pursue their dreams.
And I hope I'm not adding my own spice to your writings there, but I mean, for the one thing that stands out for me is that all of them punched way above their weight.
Absolutely.
All of them saw themselves as people that were able to give back, and were far greater than the station that they were given in life. I mean, I mentioned it to you now in our chat prior to this, is that even if they left the racism of South Africa, they found the racism in Britain as well as in the US, and yet they were writing, they were lecturing, they were learning from society and teaching society as well, which just shows that these weren't people that saw themselves as lesser than. They actually believed in themselves. And I think to a large extent that's perhaps the missing ingredient for a lot of young people in South Africa today, that we see ourselves as one of the numbers, not as that person that's exceptional and can actually make a difference. All of them were exceptional in their own way, and they recognize that exceptionalism, which I found absolutely stunning. What I want to touch on, though, is, and you know, you highlighted this element where they went abroad, and it's something, it's an internal tension. It's twice that I can think of in your book where you highlight an exchange of ideas, right?
Yes,
being able to interact with other cultures, with other countries, with other nationalities, making a difference. Obviously, we discussed this example of these men in the very early 20th century being given those opportunities, whether it was in Britain or in the US, and being able to then bring that back to South Africa. But you had a very interesting conversation in Nairobi over breakfast about a cultural exchange, about learning from many of our compatriots. Please tell us a little bit about that. Now, I just want to forewarn you. I know this is a book launch. I've been to a couple of those, and then sometimes you leave the book launch after half an hour conversation. You're like, why do I have to buy the book? Because they've discussed every last page and paragraph. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take this one snippet because I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, let me start with the part where you speak of the fact that these guys, they went there and they learned something. So what I highlight in the book is that when you look at human history, right, so long as we sort of existed, there's always been different cultures, and there's literature on this. There's always been different cultures and different regions, because, you know, we all know the world is so huge. We are not the same, right? So what happened was that in this arc of history, you know, there would be things that would be invented somewhere, and then through the process of migrations across centuries, those ideas would go from one place to another, right? And that is how we've sort of, there are many things in South Africa that we have, you know, gotten from other places, right? And there are many things.
Let's start with fire and the wheel.
You know, because, I mean, cultures have always interacted and learned and exchanged ideas and practices. So that has been the case throughout. And what I'm saying here is that as South Africans, we can remember that, because even within our domestic setting, we are not the same, which is why I like South Africa. You know, South Africa is a very diverse country. I mean, you are a man from the Nelson Mandela Foundation, so you deal with these things, right? So you assess, you see, South Africa is a very diverse country. And the question is, what can we, and we're not, how we do things is different, right? There's a difference on how the Indians in KZN, where I come from, do things in contrast to the colors in Cape Town, right? And so on. You could compare how white people do things, you know, in contrast to blacks and Indians as well. So the question is, what can we learn from one another to be able to really to move forward as a society? And what I like about South Africa, which makes me to be sort of love the country, even though given its challenges, is that we are, when I look at the sub-Saharan Africa, I feel like we're the most sort of diverse country, you know, much larger than other countries, you know, as you go into Africa. And that makes me love South Africa, because we have an opportunity to coordinate ideas that can make South Africa a better country, because we think differently. In Nairobi, I met this other diplomat. I can't mention the name because it could. He's still active. I think he was in the UN just not long time ago. I was honored to when I visited Nairobi, and a friend of mine took me through the diplomat there, and then we stayed there for the evening, and then I slept there. They gave me a nice room. You know, diplomats, these people, big people. Eh? And then the next day we are having breakfast. So it's him and his kids, and his wife was here. And then he starts to get into South Africa. Phumlani, tell me about South Africa, you know. And we started to get into a sophisticated conversation about South Africa's diplomatic sort of conduct over the past 30 years of democracy. And he's saying to me, you know, when I look at your country, it's an amazing country. You guys, you pulled it off through your transition. Of course, it was not a perfect transition, right? There were many things that went wrong. But to a larger extent, we managed to pull it through and create a society, a state, where we tried to account for everybody's sort of recognition, right? Which is what I highlight in the book. And he says to me, you know what I think you guys, what you should have done, given your very inspiring transition that moved the world, which was largely peaceful. There's this figure, Nelson Mandela, a towering figure who's known all over the world where you go. What you should have done is to make South Africa a country where really where people who have all these kinds of skills, they can come to your country. Make it attractive to be a country where people who are highly sophisticated, many of them from Africa as well, you can bring them, attract them to your country, and make, for someone who is, black person who is in US or UK or Australia or whatever, when they think about Africa, they should think South Africa could be the right space for me, you know, given the talent I have and the difference I can make. He said, under Mandela and Thabo Mbeki, that should have been the character of your foreign policy conduct, to be this thing that draws people of different cultures, especially Africans, into these skilled Africans into the country to make South Africa a better country. And he had a point there to an extent, yeah.
I find that idea fascinating, and it takes me to what I want to touch on, and it takes us back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about the interactions that you're having online, where you were talking about your want and your desire for lack of a better term, greater engagement, right? Improved engagement among South Africans. And the one thing that stands out for me is that there's plenty of engagement. I think that's something that we can all agree on, right? But the issue is it's not very constructive. It's very destructive. It's name calling, it's shouting, it's screaming, and trying to be louder than the next person. We're not sitting down, listening. And even if you are just merely listening for the purpose of being able to give a counter to a point that you disagree with, we even fail to do that. And I think it's very difficult for us to have a situation whereby we become a hub of skills for the African diaspora. So Africans that leave their homes, highly skilled people, and take those very skills to countries like the US, like Canada, like Britain, like the UAE, and not only improve their own lives there, but make lives better within those particular nations. I think that's not even possible in a state where we're unable to agree on very basic and simple things. How do we get over that? Because I think the one thing that stands out for me is for you to be able to read this book, you need to put your ego aside, sit down and actually think about what Phumlani is saying, even if you do not 100% agree with what Phumlani says. How do we get to that stage?
It's a very difficult question you've asked me at my book launch. I'm not sure what are you trying to do here, Ashwin? I trusted you, man. That's why I approached you. I thought you'd be on my side.
I trust you more because I know you can answer.
Yeah. How do we get there? You know, one of the very saddening things is that I don't know if you noticed what was happening in Parliament during the Zuma years and the internal fights and so on. I think it's happened as well under Cyril Ramaphosa as well. You know, some politicians being thrown out of the house. So that tussle, you know, it's there. It's there even amongst the people who are leading us. How do we get there? I think at some point there have to be voices like us, like me, like yourself, and I'm sure there are other people in this room. Some of them, I know the work they do, that we start really pushing to make a difference. And we are already making a difference to an extent, which is to educate people, to be tolerant of other people's sort of, you know, views. Because democracy is about that robust engagement of people who see things different or in different ways. And the question is, how do you engage one another to come to a point where you can agree, and that requires a compromise. So I think people like what I do, like what you do with your radio show and the other stuff that you do, and many other people here, we have to start talking and educating people, right? And by the way, educating politicians as well. Next week there's a conference I'm speaking at. I'll be speaking to politicians there. And I'm going to tell them, guys, you must stop fighting and really care about the issues of the country. Because we want the issues of the country addressed. And you must be tolerant of one another. So it begins by, the thing is, we need to start talking and teaching people about what democracy is. And democracy is about an engagement of how we can make our country better, and having that robust conversation. And it begins with people like us who have to make a difference. And I hope more people, with what I do, the book I've written, more people will be motivated to contribute to the betterment and to push for the conversation.
Well, I mean, I remember many years ago, I had a conversation, I think just before I had you debut on radio with me. I spoke to Leon Lowe first. And I'll never forget, he walked in, we had a conversation, and many bits and pieces I did not necessarily immediately agree with. But the key thing that stood out for me is I learned something new. And in terms of learning something new, it wasn't another point I could try to disprove or argue or whatever. The fact of the matter is, I learned to look at something from a different perspective. The same, I can say, happened every single time I had you on the show. And I had you on the show
for an hour, and that was very nice of you.
And then an hour at a time.
And then we'd wrestle there and wrestle.
But the key thing for me is that I think that my hope in anyone that picks up this book, someone sitting here, someone that's going to eventually see your book in stores and pick it up and purchase it, is that they read it with an open mind, with a purpose to learn something new. So in other words, they don't have to necessarily accept this as the gospel truth. I'm saying that at a book launch. They don't have to accept it and live and die by it, but the fact of the matter is that they should learn and take something from it. And that's definitely what happened to me. So that is my sincere hope. coming out of this book launch, coming out of this particular book. What is your hope in writing this book? What did you want to achieve in writing this book?
Hey, big question, man. So, well, the question, the book is in three sections, if I can call it. There is the period before the apartheid, or apartheid, as in the West they call it apartheid. So
We started calling it that here as well.
yeah. So there is an era before that, which was before 1948. So that covers the guys you see in this cover photo here. This was the educated elite in the cover of the book, the black educated elite at the time, who were striving for freedoms of black people in South Africa. So I started with that period, right? And then I had the apartheid period, looking at the heroes from there. And then I came into the transition, the Kodesa, because I strongly believe that some people, they call the people, today's people, call the people who were involved in the negotiation of a democratic South Africa sellouts and so on and so on. And I think that they failed to recognize that the complexity of the situation where we were at the time, a totally divided country, yet we managed to at least to come to an agreement that was not perfect, but as a start. And I think where we are today can be traced back to those compromises that we make. And you're gonna read the book to get my points on that. And then of course I reflect on the past 30 years of our democracy, that yes, we have achieved many things in the country, no doubt. Under the ANC government, yes, we have achieved many things, right? But we've also seen over the past 10 years, even by various macroeconomic measures, that we are on the decline. That's what, that's just statistics, not me sort of making up making up things here. And then of course there's a period about the future. Now, to answer your question here, what I wanted to achieve with this book was to say to people, listen, here is our history, right? Mainly of the majority. And I'm saying to them, these are the key things that we can learn. And then the last chapters, as you see, the way I say, the last chapter is the way forward for South Africa, and makes recommendations from the economy to the political process to the nature of our democracy, how we can make South Africa a better country going into the future. And my hope with this book is that people will learn that we are a society now that can shape our destiny. That is my goal. And there were these issues that we faced before. The people I called heroes went through this stuff they went through. The question is now, what can we learn from them to be able to shape the future, right? And I have a number of things they will notice. That should be the areas where we should focus on. Entrepreneurship, businesses, education, ensuring that we create a society where there is less lawlessness. We shouldn't have lawlessness in the country, right? We should address all these issues. We should address the issues of crime, right? Build institutions that work to address the needs of especially disadvantaged people. You want to give them, empower them to be participants in the market, right? Don't want to stifle them as the apartheid government was doing to control people, but allow them to drive, right, and empower them. So my hope with this book is that, and by the way, it's got the coverage of the election next year. We are going to undertake as the country our very important election. There is a take on that. There is a take on the political future of South Africa, right? On where are the areas we need to focus on and how we can improve our political process. So that has been the goal of the book, is to say, I want us to shape our future going forward, having learned from the past. And what it is that won't stop us, right? We can make a huge impact in the country for the better, having learned from the past and looking at the areas that I believe we should look at in order to make South Africa a globally competitive, stronger economy, more advanced population that is highly educated, entrepreneurial. So those are the ideas I propose here in the book, and I hope people will learn something from that.
Okay, final question from my side. You have a book out prior to that. You've been doing a lot of commentary,
Yes,
both in mainstream media as well as on social media. You've been a very hard-working man, traveling
I
the
try.
world, doing all kinds
Just
of
came
things.
back from London, yes. Great
know what I mean?
conference we had there, yeah.
You know, so when do we see your face on a political poster for
What?
vote for Phumlani? Is that the next step?
No. I'm too divisive to be a politician. I'd rather stay away. No, the thing is with politics is that, politics, you have to be politically correct in politics. You have to be politically correct in politics. Which would mean that I would need to sacrifice all this stuff I've been preaching over the past years now and tone it down now, be someone else, to try and adjust to be a politician, a typical politician. Just to give you, just quick one thing to tell you, Casual, and the audience. So I was called recently by another person from a certain political party, and then they were inviting me to speak and so on and so on. She says to me, hey, I agree, like the stuff that you are pushing. I really like your stuff. We are saying the right stuff. But guess what? Our party is not going to say it, because it's going to be seen as something else if we say it. But at least you are saying it, Phumlani, and thanks to you. But we are watching your stuff closely, and somebody has to say it, but we can't say it in politics. But I like what you're doing, and that's why I'm inviting you to come in. So if I were to delve into the side of politics, Gershwell, I would really have to make a great deal of compromises and I think values as well in an effort to be a politician, which is what usually happens. I just feel that there is much more greater opportunity and role for young people in South Africa to be more sort of shaking the debate. We need those people who will not be afraid to point out. We are not here inciting violence or spreading hate. So we are just questioning the ideas and policies that can make us a better country.
Yeah.
And we need that.
And validly so. That's the one thing that I give my, take my hat off for. I never wear a hat anyway, but if I was wearing a hat, I'd take my hat off for the fact that, well, it comes with research, thought, and a deep sense of ponderance. You think the stuff through. And that, for me, is the most important part. Forget the violence, incitement, and what that many others do. All too often, it's quite frankly nonsense. It's stuff that people didn't think through. And this is well thought through. So, folks, fair warning. There's limited numbers of these. So if you are planning on getting yourself a copy tonight, make sure that you get a copy. I have a signed copy, so I'm fine. I'm covered. Thank you very much. And now I'm dropping it. I'm definitely covered. I'll actually show you. It's signed by a certain Mr. Phumlani Majozi. There it is. Thank you very much.
And what's the message there?
You have a horrible handwriting.
Can you read it? Can you read it?
Thanks for your support, Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, Mr. Brooks, yeah. Thanks for your support, Mr. Brooks.
I don't get called Mr. Brooks all that often, but really, get yourself a copy, and Phumlani will be around to sign, of course. This is your opportunity now to ask him some difficult questions. I did say I wasn't going to make it a sweetheart one, so you also don't have to make it a sweetheart conversation. Ask him the tough questions.
Why wasn't ask me difficult questions? You?
I understand there's a roving mic.
I think I called the wrong guy. Yeah?
Just grab this one.
Yes. Will you get there? Okay, it's fine.
Good evening. Phumlani, congratulations on a very successful book.
Thank you. Hey, John. Hey,
And on
good, my man. Huh?
Yeah, on my second attempt, maybe I'll get you to sign it. My question, you're a very broad thinker on politics and ideology, and a thought that's been attracting me recently is, we came out of a very evil state, apartheid, and if I may say, our black population showed a lot of humility in moving forward. And a thought that has come through recently is the conservatism is the wrong word, but the lack of extremes in our political environment. Yes, we do have parties on both extremes, but broadly our population has pulled together, and yes, we have gone through a period of difficulty, but we're not Argentina that swings from a an extreme left-wing state, an extreme libertarian state. We're more orthodox. And just like your thoughts on that part of our population, that ability, the humility of our population, our ability to move on and draw together. And, you know, we really are a good state. We're world champions, but apart from that, we really are a good state. I'd like your thoughts, please, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Sean, and thanks for coming through. And I've said this before, and you know, people, when you make noise, they think that you don't like the country and so on. This is a country of remarkable people, which is what you are saying, John. This is a country of great talent. In the last section, the conclusion, I talk about the talent that we have in the country. I discuss many people there, from Mwele Tsimpegi to Lumgile Mondi, and all these talented people who really, to Busi Mavuso as well, who is currently the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. We have remarkable people in this country who can make a huge difference. And I think we sort of underestimate the potential we have as a nation of people who have become an inspiration around the world. And again, I speak about that inspiration in the book, which is what John is talking about, what we went through and managed to be so humble. It's not a perfect place, we do have challenges, but we've come to be at a place where, at least in most parts of the last 30 years, it's a place where we're trying to build something together. Of course, there are divisions now that we are seeing and so on, but we were humbled enough to create something that can inspire the world. And we do, what I can say, John, is that we are a society that has huge potential. We just need to exploit the talent that we have. What saddens me with our politics is that as soon as you are this, I've noticed this a pattern where they're very much smart, intelligent, driven people who have that integrity. They're usually ostracized, pushed off politics, demonized, and it's ensured by interest groups, by the way. It's ensured that these people don't succeed in trying to make, in trying to create a better country or better government. So I do agree, John, we are a society with some remarkable people, and I think we have huge potential. We just need to exploit it the right way.
So someone has already opened the betting, so no need to be shy. I'm sure you have questions. Hands up. Okay, so this time around, what I will do is I'll take 3 questions, give him a breather so he can think about his responses. I'll start with the gentleman.
Thanks, Phumlani, and also congratulations on the book. It's a big achievement. You mentioned foreign policy, which I don't think has really been a big part of the debate in South Africa, really up until the last few years, particularly, I guess, since we invaded Ukraine and now the government backing Hamas terrorists and that sort of thing. So I'm interested in what your view is about what's driven this strange turn in our foreign policy, and where do you think South Africa needs to situate itself in terms of its foreign policy for us to get the maximum benefit for South Africans, kind of being far away from most of the problems in the world from a foreign policy perspective?
Okay, and then can we take question number 2? Oh, already. Okay, there are people with mics, so if you have a mic, please wave at me. Thanks.
Good evening, Phumlani.
Yes, buddy.
My name is Luke. I work for a magazine called Joburg Style. So I just want to find out, how did you come to choose this topic? As I can see that I believe you are someone who never grew in the apartheid period. So how did you come up with the theme for the subject for the title?
This was the second question.
And then the gent.
Yeah, Sean's the name, and I've lived 38 years in Sweden, and I get the question often, what are you doing here? Why do you want to come back to South Africa? What is there in South Africa for you? And I often answer the question that I want to plow back in South Africa, but I'm finding it so difficult to plow back into South Africa with all the skills. Like we talk of heroes that have come back and they've studied overseas. I've studied overseas, and I'm trying to plow back to give back to my country. But it's so difficult. It's like stop all over. So I'm trying to do something on my own, but it's really going totally slow, and things like that. And that's one of the questions. There's a lot of things going on in my head right now, and that one of the things that's also going on in my head right now is the discussion, the we and them. That discussion must stop, and the tolerance must come back into the country, where not, those squatters over there, we over here, things like that. That has to stop. And these are one of the things that I'd like to mention, and how to plow back to this beautiful country.
Can I just mention, Sean, you came back for more sunlight.
Yeah, and the
Amongst other
mosquitoes
things.
also, they're eating me up, man. The mosquitoes are eating me.
So we had 3 questions. Okay, I can remember all of them. So there's one with Benji. Where are we on foreign policy? By the way, there's no foreign policy in this book. I must stress that. There's no foreign policy. So, you know, where are we on foreign policy? So, where we are right now, I know I was on this other American TV station recently, and they were asking me, why did South Africa respond the way it did, or the government respond the way it did to the conflict that we are seeing in Palestine and Israel? And my explanation was that, you know, our government is currently led by the ANC, right? And how the ANC has seen the Palestine-Israel conflict, they've seen it in the lens of, you know, it's Palestinians fighting for their freedoms, that they are being repressed by Israel, and that has been the prism of how the ANC sees that conflict. Hence, it has unashamedly, you know, been on the side of Palestine. And my view with respect to a situation like that is that what I've noticed when it comes to our government is that we are not really strategic as to when to do things and when not, and when to do them, right? We have taken a position where obviously some of the things we are doing, we are ensuring that we are really creating, or we are being seen in the foreign policy space to pick sides. And when it comes to foreign policy, we need to be strategic enough to say, you want to be able to conduct, and of course you have some minimum things that we are looking for. But when I conduct foreign policy in a way that does not disadvantage you now and also over the long term, that you want to come out as you are a human rights supporter, right? So how do you ensure that you stand up and condemn the actions that have been committed in a complex situation like that of Israel and Palestine? You've got to ensure that where you don't want to come out as someone who picks a side, right? And I think our government has been very much wrong to do that. Instead, it should be pushing for peace, for the negotiation, because if you pick a side in that complex conflict, trust me, you are not going to win. So right now what they've done is to pick a side, and their role should be to say, you know what, we need to get the Israelis and Palestinians to come to a situation where there's peace between the two. And I'm not going to achieve that if you support side in that complex conflict. So I think we have been less strategic, where we haven't really picked the side that is in our interest and that is rational, given the state of the world. Now, we can do better, by the way, in that front, if we commit to do things the right way. And then the second question was about, why did I choose? I never lived under the apartheid. Yes, I never lived under the apartheid system at all. So now, you know, there's a building that went on fire not a long time ago here in Johannesburg, where at least 70 people died. One of the ministers came and said, apartheid has something to do with this. I found that totally disgraceful, because you have people who are so incompetent to manage our borders, people who are so incompetent to ensure that there is lawfulness in the country, that the laws are enforced, and now you come and blame the apartheid system. So the apartheid thing, casual, which is what I do point out in the book, it's being used now as an excuse for incompetence, people failing or the government failing to meet its duties, and then we are being told and manipulated that it's apartheid. That thing sickens me. And I do hope that South Africans, especially we black South Africans, because when they say that they are targeting us to manipulate us, that you can see through that these politicians are manipulating us. They failed on many things, and now they are blaming us, right? So we must be, hence what motivated me to choose the title, is that, look, we cannot sit out there and see ourselves as victims, which is what the subtitle says. How we can reject victimhood dogmas and be able to reshape our country and do things ourselves. I was motivated by the figures who lived in the very rough times, who were doing great things for themselves and their communities. And now we are here now. We shouldn't take the nonsense that comes from politicians who are telling us that they mess things up, and now they are telling us that it's apartheid. To me, that drives me nuts, and I hate that. Now, the last question about you are putting your money here, or we are investing here, and we want to make a difference. But you can see that things, they're not that fast as you want them to be. That is true. In fact, Thabo Mbeki gave us, just check the speech casual that Thabo Mbeki gave just not long time ago at UNISA. What Thabo Mbeki did, which is mad from him, President Thabo Mbeki, he said, listen, when you look at the period when I was the Deputy President of South Africa under Mandela, and the period when I was the President, our economy was stronger, right? Our unemployment rates were not as messy as it is right now. We had a better performing economy. But then, after that, things went down. And Thabo Mbeki, he said that, should check the speech, and I urge all of you to watch the speech. He gave that to UNISA a few months back. And Thabo Mbeki had a point there, right? That we are now, there's this, our economy now is underperforming very badly. We have seen really corruption becoming something that is very troubling. And we've seen even the power blackouts really crippling the economy. So now, the challenge is on the people who are governing us to fix the institutions, to get the economy back on track. And the challenge is on us as people to hold those people to account if they don't deliver the desired results that we want as a people, right? If we continue to see crime, we continue to see staggering unemployment rates, we continue to see, lawlessness, we continue to see our borders not being protected, our borders that we have in the country. So if we don't, we as citizens need to hold our leaders to accountable as well. So it begins with shaking things up. My point is that I do agree with you. We do have things that are quite slow, and they have been, over the past sort of 12, 15 years or so, been going on the wrong direction economically. But now the question is, we must hold these people to account and force them to make a difference.
Okay, based on time, this is the final set of 3 questions that I'll be taking. So, going. There's a lady.
Raised the hand long time ago, right there.
So number 1, is there number 2? Let's identify. Okay, please continue.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you, Faith.
For being an author. I can't wait to put my hands on your book.
By the way, sorry, just before you continue, she's an author as well. She's won awards. So you can continue now. You can continue now.
Come on now.
Give you some limelight, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I can't really wait to put my hands on it. So the question that I have for you, right, is that our heroes fought for the life that we are living today, right? But also at the same time, the people that are currently put to govern our country, they are elected and voted out, while people are ruling, they are told step down because they're not delivering, or they're not delivering according to the expectations of the people, of the voters. So now, approaching the elections season, right, how would you advise a person who's very confused at who to vote for? Asking for a friend.
Good question.
Is that the friend you are asking for to vote for?
Yes.
Who to vote for? Eish, let's go to the next question. Mr. Nkala, shoot the question.
Phumlani, congratulations on,
Thanks, my brother,
on the
Ngiyabonga.
book. Yeah. So for me, I've got a skinny question to ask you concerning, I think you've touched quite a lot in terms of what is going right in the country. I think my concern is more of accountability. People like myself who are not into politics, I'm a scientist by profession. What is our role, or what can we play in a society to ensure that we hold our government accountable? I think I'll make a simple example. A South African shouldn't have more than 25K in the household. But our president had more than that, and he was never arrested. What can we do as citizens to hold them accountable? Thanks.
Deep question.
And then final question. Do you have any takers? Okay, we have one last question, yeah?
Yeah, hi again.
Sure.
Mine is very, I'll try to simplify it as best as I can. So, with everything said, especially by this gentleman here, what actually comes next after the book? Because much of the people who need to hear many of the messages you and others are saying, they're not specifically readers, if I can put it like that. They need someone to actually say it, and we don't know at this point how we can actually get to their whether it's about election, political ideology, the future of the country, etc., etc. So since you're doing something about it already with a book, how can we take that messaging of not just the heroes, but, you know, spreading that message of, right, this is exactly where people start, and this is how they become something of themselves as a young black boy, young black woman from the beginning, to them having lived a fulfilled life. So how can we take that message to those who need to hear it? Because inside of a book, many of us here will read it, but you're preaching to the chorus. So what comes next for you?
Is that the end? No other question?
That was by far the toughest round ever. I am so happy. That's why I'm not going to write any books.
You see what you get yourself into if you write a book. Okay, let's start with Faith's question. Faith, you've asked me a very... who to vote for? Okay, let me give some context. I won't mention it because I'm not a campaigner for political parties. So one thing has been clear. It's that the ANC has been on the decline. And I'm not talking about, it's not an opinion. Look at the ANC's support over the past close to, don't know, 2 decades now or so. The party has been going down its support. It's been slow, it's a slow decline. That's what's been happening. So each and every election, they've been, you know, getting lesser and lesser and lesser votes. So now that has created an environment where most people who watch these things, whether it's in business or in banks where John works and NGOs, there is that consensus that we are headed now to an environment where there won't be one dominant party, where we are going to see a coalition environment, where there will be coalition or coalition politics, where the ANC will have to govern along with other parties if it still remains it remains in power. So we are entering a phase where there will be no major big sort of dominant political party, which is the state that the ANC has been in since democracy began in 1994. Now, I have argued before that the decline of the ANC is good for South Africa's democracy, in my perspective. The reason being is that we have seen that the extent at which it can abuse its dominant power, right, and take decisions that go, according to any rational person, counter to the interests of the citizen. Why? Because they can use their majority just as easy like that, right? And change things in the way that they want, which is not in favor of, at times not in favor of, or in the interest of the people. So the decline of the ANC has been a positive. We need our democracy to move away from one dominant party into that coalition, which won't be easy, but at least we need to learn our democracy to be part of that. Now, having said that, that has been good. Now, to suggest an answer, Faith, what I'm saying is that next year, if you want to bring about change in South Africa, then I would argue that in my view, I'm going to preach something I've said, anyway. And that is, next year, you have to hold those people who are in governance to account, and one way to do that, you can vote for any. Try and vote for the opposition next year, because we want to strengthen democracy. Vote for any. I don't care what opposition party you vote for, but vote for the opposition, and try to bolster and strengthen our democracy. Because if you keep on voting for one guys who have abused their power, they did well at one point, but then they turned into people who abuse their power. That's not going to help. Give your vote to the opposition. Make opposition stronger, to make our which will translate into making our institutions stronger as well over the long term. Now, Koketso and Bongani, they asked me sort of similar questions, Kala, about what can you do. I mean, you are from the educated elite. You've just said a scientist yourself, and what difference can you make? I think I've always said that one of the measures of the maturity of democracy is civil society, right? And civil society, these are NGOs. These are places where you can make a difference or support for the NGOs, or be part of NGOs that are holding leaders accountable. It could be in education, it could be in spheres of policy and so on. You start there and be a participant in making that difference. Because there's no other magic here, we need to be honest. It begins with us, which is what I highlight in the book. It begins with us as individuals, we participate, and we make a difference. And this will involve where we find ourselves having to go to churches, we go to schools, because we are trying to really to encourage people to be participants in a democracy. It begins with that action as to who can I join to hold our leaders accountable? Who can I join that argues that the president had a big amount of foreign currency in his home, and he wasn't held to account? Who can I join then to challenge that, or to raise that through either a court process or through a movement? We have to be participants, guys. We have to participate. I'm not saying be a politician, but do something. And sometimes you don't have to be a leader, a radical leader of something, but join the group or contribute something that makes a difference. And Koketso, it touches on your question as well. What comes after this book? What comes after this book is nothing other than a drive for people to say, you know what, we have to make South Africa a better country. And people like you are very much active on social media as well. How do you get people to talk about these things casual, and to teach them to be tolerant of ideas, of democracy? And it begins there, step by step we're going to get there. It cannot be overnight.
One thing that I'm definitely taking out of your book, I think action that you can take, is just by taking some form of responsibility. I think that's the one thing that comes out of this book.
In fact, that's a summary of the book. That's the right word. Take responsibility.
I hope I get credited at some point. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful, but we're out of time. I really had a good time. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah.
And remember, limited stock, so make sure that you get
Sorry, I'm just playing I did. Thanks, Gasho.
Sure.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Phumlani and Gershel for an awesome conversation. Copies of the book are available in store. One last thanks to Tracy. She was supposed to be doing this. I told Phumlani she doesn't speak at these things. Tracy McDonald, who's Phumlani's publisher. Thank you to our audience for being here throughout the night. One last round of applause. Thank you.